News all the way from London. Thank you. Now we move on to Africa. Egypt has signed a €4 billion memorandum of understanding with the European Union to strengthen economic cooperation and support local reforms. President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi has attended the signing ceremony in Brussels alongside European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa. The agreement includes a financial package and support for Egypt's participation in the EU's Horizon Europe research program. President Sisi has emphasized the strategic partnership between Egypt and the EU, highlighting opportunities in sectors like pharmaceuticals, renewable energy, and artificial intelligence. He has further stressed the EU's role as Egypt's top trading partner, noting discussions on integrating Egypt into European supply chains and expanding investment opportunities. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mohammed Osman. He's an international relations specialist, joins us live from Cairo. Thank you very much, Mohammed Osman, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this news, does this partnership signal a shift in Europe's strategy towards deeper engagement with North African states and Egypt?
Thank you for having me, Asuma. Again, always a pleasure to be with you and on NewsX World. Indeed, Egypt and the European Union have a very long-lasting and deep-rooted strategic relationship that dates back to the early 2000s. The two countries, Egypt and the European Union, have signed a comprehensive partnership agreement back in 2004, and also some sort of limited free trade agreement also in 2009. And in 2024, both counterparts renewed and expanded their strategic relationship by signing a new strategic partnership agreement. And indeed, as part of this agreement, the European Union supported Egypt's economy with a package of economic support that was worth about $8 billion, or 7.5 billion euros to be more precise. And now Egypt and the European Union hold their first summit ever in Brussels. And of course, this reflects the weight and magnitude of Egypt in its regional surrounding, whether in North Africa or in the entirety of the African continent or in the Middle East as well, and the Islamic world and the global South. Egypt is a very preeminent power in these circles and has great weight, and therefore it has been bestowed with the quote-unquote honor of having a summit of its own with the European Union, which represents about 27 countries. The European Union is the second largest foreign investor in the Egyptian economy, tens of billions of euros of investment in renewable energy, in fossil energy, and in industry and agriculture as well. And at the same time, also Egypt, one of the main receivers of Egyptian exports is the European Union. Also, there is a very deep cooperation between both the European Union and Egypt in the spheres of defense and security, and also in combating illegal immigration and cross-border crime, as well as terrorism. And this is what makes Egypt a very valuable partner for the Europeans, as Egypt is one of the main countries in North Africa that stifles the flow of illegal migrants from North Africa and the African continent and the Middle East to Europe. And this is something that Europe appreciates, and in turn does lend more support to Egypt's economy in this regard. And also Europe is keen on diversifying its economic relationship and strategic relationships with various actors, with Egypt, with India, with Japan, with even with China, despite the tensions, because they know that the economic dependency on the United States in many aspects right now is creating a problem for them. And also their previously increased reliance in the past on Russian energy, of course, came to the test when the Russia-Ukraine war started, and Europe had to cut off most of its economic ties with the Russian Federation. And now Egypt will be one of the prime sources of natural gas that will provide Europe with energy, cheap energy rather, due to and compensate the loss of Russian gas. And on the other hand, also Egypt has been keen since President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was elected in 2014 on diversifying Egypt's foreign relations and partnerships. So Egypt has a strategic partnership, of course, with the United States, a long and standing strategic partnership with the European Union, and also a very strong and deep strategic relationship with China, with Russia, and with India. So Egypt seeks, and Egypt also joined the BRICS very recently. So as you can see, Asuma, Egypt is always playing this balancing act as to stay positively neutral and at the same time being very positively interactive with the major world powers.
And Osman, building on that, you've mentioned all the good points or positive outcomes, but could there be any negative outcomes as well, such as risking ties while getting closer economic ties with the EU? Could it affect Egypt's relationship with other major partners of it, such as the Gulf states or China?
No, I don't think so. These partnerships are complementary to one another. Now we are in a globalized world, Asuma, and what counts in this respect is the political stance of Egypt. And Egypt always adopts this policy of non-alignment. And as you very well know, Asuma, Egypt, along with India and Indonesia and other countries back in the 1950s, founded the non-aligned movement, and it has been its main goal was to prevent or not to leave the nations of the global south susceptible to the polarization of the conflicts of the great powers and the competition between the great powers. And I think that Egypt is doing just that. As I just said, Egypt, even though it maintains very deep ties with the European Union, for example, on the other hand, it has also a very strong ties with Russia. Russia is investing heavily in the Egyptian economy, building the country's first nuclear power plant worth about $25 billion. Russia is also one of Egypt's main defense partners, and they maintain a very strong relationship. Russia supplies Egypt with arms, for example, and even transfers arms technology to Egypt since the time of the Soviet Union. And Egypt, in turn, also has had a very balanced stance towards the war in Ukraine, for example. So Egypt did vote in favor of the UN resolution condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but at the same time, Egypt rejected publicly applying any unilateral sanctions on Russia. And Egypt did stress that the root causes of the Ukrainian conflict, which is NATO expansion, basically needs to be treated as part of the solution of this war. And at the same time, Egypt refrained from imposing sanctions and maintained and even deepened its strategic relationship with Russia. But at the same time, it is very keen not to lose its European partners and allies, and deepens its economic relations with them, and also their cooperation on security matters, as well as matters of border security and illegal immigration. Because basically, Egypt stands to gain a lot from these strategic partnerships. Egypt also very recently signed, about a year ago, or even more, a strategic partnership agreement with India. Narendra Modi visited Egypt. President El-Sisi visited India as well, and was hosted as a guest of honor in the national parade in India. So as you can see, Egypt is very keen on diversifying its international relations and its foreign relations in general, not to be completely reliant on the United States, as was the case before the year 2013.
And as you mentioned, Egypt does remain Russia's biggest trading partner in North Africa. And last year, their trade surpassed $9 billion. So how do you think, how will it manage the conflict of interest, or how will it manage the conflict of interest with EU and Russia, and while getting closer to EU, while having closer ties with Russia?
I think Russia understands Egypt's relationship with other countries. Russia understands that Egypt is a strategic partner and a friend, not an ally. We are not an ally of anyone, actually. Egypt maintains neutrality with regards to many of the regions and the world's conflicts as to avoid the consequences of this extreme polarization. And Egypt, along with countries like South Africa and Brazil and many other countries around the world from the global south, do advocate for the idea of this positive neutrality in order not to get engulfed in any of the ongoing conflicts in the world. Because at the same time, Russia understands this fully, and they do understand that Egypt has a strategic partnership with both the United States and the European Union, and they have no reservations on that. And on the other side, they do appreciate how Egypt was keen on not to join the sanctions against Russia, and even the trade grew much larger, as you just said, Asuma. When the Ukraine war started in 2022, Egyptian trade between Egypt and Russia stood at around 5.5 billion. Now, as you just said, it stands in 2024, by the end of 2024, at about 9 billion annually. So it doubled, almost doubled, basically within the span of 3.5 years. And Egypt is very keen to maintain this relationship. And at the same time, also, Egypt is very eager to maintain its relations with the European Union, and the European Union understands that Egypt will not forfeit its relations with countries like Russia or China so that they would maintain the relations with the EU or vice versa. So Egypt has established itself as this neutral actor that leads an independent foreign policy, and its partners do respect Egypt's entitlement to exercise that right.
And lastly, Osman, now that Egypt, as you can balance, as you mentioned, it can balance this and diversifying all this in middle of all the geopolitical things going on now, how will this 4 billion EU-Egypt agreement reshape Cairo's economic and political alignment?
I think it will aid in pushing forward the economic reforms President El-Sisi has been leading for the past 10 years. Egypt has been witnessing drastic economic reforms in cooperation with the IMF and even other international partners like the EU and China and the Arab Gulf states as well, who all supported Egypt's economic reforms in this comprehensive form of cooperation, and these reforms did yield positive results, with inflation being reduced significantly, and also with economic growth being moving forward, even with the crises of COVID and the fallout of the Russia-Ukraine war, which caused a huge shock to the supply chains, economic supply chains all around the world, and also the war in the Middle East and in Gaza, and with the closure of the disruption of maritime navigation in the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, which inflicted upon Egypt about $10 billion of losses due to the reduction of navigation in the Suez Canal. Yet Egypt, despite all of this, the economy is still growing. Egypt has recorded a growth rate and its economy is forecasted to grow at about 4% this year. And this package by the European Union will further support economic development inside Egypt, as it is mostly directed towards supporting small businesses and small industries in Egypt. And Egypt is working forward on a policy to augment its exports, especially industrial exports and non-oil exports abroad. And within the past 10 years, Egypt's exports have grown from 26 billion in 2011 or 2014 rather, and now they stand at around 52 or 53 billion dollars. And one of the main recipients of Egyptian exports is the European Union. So for the European Union, Egypt is a source of cheap commodities, whether agricultural or industrial, and both countries, the European Union and Egypt, do have a free trade agreement. So this will further facilitate Egypt's ability to increase its exports to the European Union, and also will make Egyptian goods accessible to European markets at cheap prices, which is beneficial to the European Union as well. So this EU package is mutually beneficial for both sides. Assume, as you can see, it is not charity or anything of this sort.
Okay. I thought over there you were about to say make Egypt great again over there. Anyway, thank you.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
entitled to love my country, you know.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Always great learning from you. Thank you, Muhammad
Thank you.
Osman, for joining us and sharing that insight as an international relations specialist. Now we move on to our next news.